Entex Industries is an oddball company in kit models because they were really known more for making what would become the mortal enemy of kit model companies, electronic games. It is not uncommon for model companies to deal in electronic devices that are related to the model business, like slot cars, model trains, or radio control models. But Entex was an upstart plastic model and toy company that was getting involved in electronic games early on. The Compton, California-based company was formed in the minds of Tony Close and Nicholas Carlozzi in late 1969 or early 1970, and given the name NTX, which was just Nicholas and Tony's initials, and then they tacked an X on the end of it to sound cool. Given the sound of the name, they christened it Entex. As Entex was getting set up, they added a third partner, Nick Underhill. In 1970, they started making their signature toy, Lock Blocks, which were similar to Legos, a series of connecting blocks made out of plastic. Then they started contracting kit models to be sold under their brand, beginning with a Toyota Celica from Bondi. They also made a Model T. I have not been able to determine whether they made their own molds or were using someone else's. They do look quite similar to the old Revell kits, but I cannot be sure. Being located in Compton, they were only 20 miles away from many plastic mold makers like Adams and several large kit manufacturers like Revell. Although there's no evidence of direct crossover, it did mean that the skill sets were available in the area. In 1971, they added an airplane from the Sancho mold, a 1:240 scale Lockheed Neptune, which despite its small scale, was called the Air Giant. In 1972, Renoir and Otaki kits were added to the mix, and some more car molds were added. They may have contracted some initial models, but it appears that some of their cars and their C5 Galaxy might have been original molds, as they do not show any previous issuances. In 1973, they added a range of classic racing planes from Imai, military jets from Otaki, airliners from Nito, warbirds from Aoshima, and a B-52 from Fuji. Also, the Hughes H-1 Hercules, aka the Spruce Goose, was added from what appears to be a new mold. By the way, the Hercules was not made of spruce. It was just a nickname, and one that Howard Hughes detested. As the 1970s rolled along, Entex expanded its catalog, but it appears that most of their kits were made elsewhere and marketed under the Entex name. Entex actively pursued the growing electronics game industry, and by 1976 they released the game Telepong, which was a dedicated home video game console. It was a home version of the popular, and I might add the first, video game, Pong. Don't laugh, this was pretty sophisticated stuff for 1976. Remember, most computers still looked like this. The company did very well for about 5 years, with sales of over $100 million in 1980. But sales and profits are not the same thing. The electronic game business was evolving rapidly. Especially damaging to Entex were the new home video game consoles. Despite Entex's reputation for being a very high-end electronic games maker, by the early 1980s, the company was being buried by the rapidly growing and ever more competitive electronic game market. For example, Vectrex, created by Jay Smith, was released by Milton Bradley and rapidly outpaced them in sales in 1982. Despite this, they continued to expand their kit model product line with kits from the old Aurora and Sankyo molds. They did try to stay competitive with the advancements in electronic games with 2 tabletop electronic game consoles of their own that used swappable cartridges. But as this is a kit models channel, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, as the electronic games would be an hour-long documentary of their own. It suffices to say that the writing was on the wall. In 1983, they added the last plastic model kit to their catalog, a VW Rabbit originally by Bondi. In 1984, Tony Clowes left the company to join a rival electronics firm, Entex. The little company right out of Compton closed its doors not long after. The idea that the very industry they had helped develop had both left them behind and helped kill off their model business as well must have seemed a bitter irony. I'm Max. Thanks for watching.
From Soho down to Brighton, I must have played them all, but I ain't seen nothing like him in any amusement hall. The deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays with me, people. He stands like a statue, becomes part of the machine. Feels all the bumpers, almost plays it clean. Pays my tuition, that teacher count is ball. The deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays with me, pinball. He's a pinball wizard, has to be a twist. Pinball wizard's got such a simple wrist. How do you think he does it? I don't know. What makes him so good? He got no distractions, can't hear no calls and bells. Don't see no lights flashing, taste my sense of smell. Always gets a replay, never tilts at all. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays with me, pinball. He's a pinball wizard, has to be a twist. Pinball wizard's got such a simple wrist. Living at my favorite table, he can beat my best. His disciples see the man, he just does the rest. He's got crazy little fingers, never seen a ball. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays with me, pinball. I thought I was a dining table king. I just headed my pinball crown to hell. At my favorite table, he can beat my best. His disciples see the man, he just does the rest. He's got crazy little fingers, never seen him fall. That deaf, dumb, and blind kid sure plays with me, pinball.
The idea that the very industry they had helped develop both left them behind and helped kill off their other business must have seemed a bitter irony. A bitter irony. Must have seemed a bitter irony. Must have seemed a bitter irony.